Everything you've been told about God is a lie. Not a misunderstanding. Not an alternative interpretation. A blatant, carefully constructed, millennial-old deception designed to keep you enslaved. The deity that billions worship as the one true God, the so-called Yahweh of the Old Testament, is not the supreme creator. He is not the God of love. He is not even a benevolent force in the universe. He is a cosmic parasite, a tyrant masquerading as divinity, a ruler who built this world as a prison, not as an act of divine love, but as a desperate attempt to consolidate his own stolen power. Let's start with who Yahweh actually is. In Gnostic teachings, he is not the ultimate God. He is not the source of existence. He is a false creator, an impostor known as the Demiurge, a Greek word meaning craftsman or fabricator. The real God, the unknowable source, exists far beyond the physical universe. But Yahweh? Yahweh is nothing more than a cosmic dictator, an entity that claims to be God but is actually an inferior being, driven by arrogance, jealousy, and fear. This isn't some fringe interpretation. The Nag Hammadi scriptures, a collection of Gnostic texts discovered in 1945, explicitly reveal that Yahweh is not the supreme being but an aberration. According to these texts, Yahweh, originally known as Yaldabaoth, was a mistake. He was created without divine authority by the Aeon Sophia, a higher celestial being, and as a result, he was born deformed, ignorant, and filled with rage. Instead of recognizing his place in the cosmic order, he declared himself the only God, a delusion fueled by his own insecurity. His famous proclamation in Isaiah 45 verse 5, "I am the Lord, and there is no other, apart from me there is no God," is not the voice of the Almighty. It is the boast of a liar, an impostor who fears the truth will be exposed. Yahweh's behavior in the Old Testament isn't just questionable. It's monstrous. This is a deity who orders genocides, demands blood sacrifices, revels in destruction. He slaughters Egyptian firstborns, commands the annihilation of entire nations, delights in burnt offerings, and rewards blind obedience with violence and cruelty. This is not the mark of an enlightened divine being. This is the behavior of a warlord, a tyrant, a being obsessed with control. Look at the book of Job. Yahweh makes a bet, yes, a bet, with Satan, gambling with the life of a man who was blameless just to prove a point. He allows Job's children to be murdered, his body to be covered in sores, his life to be shattered, all to win an argument. This is not the behavior of a loving, benevolent God. This is the cruelty of a petty ruler who enjoys watching his subjects suffer. And then there's Genesis. The story of Adam and Eve isn't about disobedience. It's about Yahweh keeping humanity in ignorance. The serpent in the Garden of Eden wasn't the villain. The serpent was the one trying to free mankind. Yahweh didn't want humanity to have knowledge. He wanted them blind, obedient, submissive. And when they dared to seek wisdom, he cursed them. Why? Because an educated, awakened population is harder to control. This is the same pattern we see with tyrants throughout history, whether in politics, religion, or oppressive regimes. Keep them ignorant. Keep them fearful. Keep them enslaved. So, how did Yahweh get away with this? How did he convince billions of people that he is God? Simple: fear, war, and deception. His followers, the archons, enforce his rule by manipulating reality, controlling religious institutions, and ensuring that alternative spiritual knowledge, Gnostic wisdom, esoteric teachings, the truth, remain suppressed. Entire holy books were banned, burned, and rewritten to fit the narrative of Yahweh's absolute dominion. The early church eradicated the Gnostics, branding them heretics. Why? Because the Gnostics knew the truth, that Yahweh was not God, a jailer who had hijacked creation. Even Jesus Christ, as portrayed in certain Gnostic texts like the Gospel of Thomas, came not to serve Yahweh but to expose him. Jesus spoke of a kingdom not of this world, a reality beyond the grasp of the Demiurge. He taught that salvation comes through gnosis, knowledge, not blind faith. And for that, he was silenced, distorted, and transformed into an instrument of the very system he sought to dismantle. This is where it all connects. The Old Testament paints a picture of Yahweh as a jealous, vengeful, power-hungry ruler. The Gnostic texts confirm that he is a false god, a tyrant who claims ownership over a world he did not create. His obsession with blood sacrifice, his demand for unquestioning obedience, his violent suppression of wisdom and knowledge, all of it fits the profile of a being who is not a benevolent creator, but a cosmic dictator afraid of losing power. Before this world existed, before the stars, before time itself, there was harmony. A vast, unknowable source. A divine order beyond comprehension. The true God, the absolute, the eternal, existed in pure balance, emanating countless beings of light, eons, each possessing aspects of divine wisdom. Among them was Sophia, the embodiment of wisdom itself. She was luminous, powerful, nearly perfect. But something happened. Sophia made a mistake that would alter the course of reality itself. She acted alone. Without the approval of the greater divine order, she attempted to create a being of her own, to bring forth life from herself alone, without balance, without unity. And what emerged was a disaster. It was Yaldabaoth. A malformed, twisted entity, filled with ignorance, rage, and a hunger for control. Unlike the other divine beings, he had no knowledge of the source, no connection to the greater cosmic truth. He was isolated, incomplete, unstable. His very existence was an abomination, something that was never meant to be. And yet, he believed himself to be of God. Blinded by his own arrogance, Yaldabaoth tore through the divine realms, carving out his own dominion of darkness, a lesser, corrupted realm far below the true heavens. It was here that he created the material world, a twisted imitation of the divine order, built not from wisdom, but from his own confusion, fear, and hunger for worship. And then, in an act of pure megalomania, he sealed off his realm from the greater cosmos, cutting off humanity from the source, ensuring that all who were born into his world would never know the truth. And the worst part, he forgot where he came from. Yaldabaoth was so consumed by his own delusion that he convinced himself that he was the only God, that nothing had existed before him. He looked upon the world he had created, flawed, corrupt, decaying, and he declared himself its master. He told his archons, his enforcers, his jailers, his cosmic secret police, "I am a jealous God, and there is no other God besides me." He took the name Yahweh, demanded worship, and set himself upon a throne of fire, blood, and deception. But here's where things get really interesting. Sophia never meant for this to happen. When she saw what she had created, she was horrified. She tried to correct her mistake, but it was too late. Yaldabaoth had already seized control of the material realm. So instead, she enacted a different plan. She planted a spark of divine essence, a piece of the true God, inside humanity itself. While Yaldabaoth enslaved the physical world, Sophia ensured that every human being carried a fragment of the real divinity within them. A hidden code, buried deep in the soul. Something Yaldabaoth could never fully control. And he knew it. That's why the God of the Old Testament is so obsessed with control. That's why he's so afraid of knowledge, so hostile to wisdom, so determined to keep humanity in submission. Because deep down, he knows he is not the true God. He knows he is a fraud. He knows that if humans ever truly woke up, if they remembered who they really are, his entire empire would collapse overnight. And this isn't just some old myth. The clues are everywhere. Why do so many ancient cultures speak of a lesser God, a fallen creator, a jealous ruler who wants to be worshipped but is not the true source? Why do stories of a God trying to suppress knowledge appear in so many traditions? From the forbidden fruit in Genesis to the suppressed Gnostic Gospels, the truth has been buried again and again. But the cracks are showing. Yaldabaoth's control is slipping. More and more people are questioning. More and more people are waking up. And the more you know, the more you see through the illusion. This world was never meant to be a paradise. It was built as a prison. But inside you, inside every human being, is something Yaldabaoth can never touch, a piece of the true God, a light that no false creator, no cosmic tyrant, no jealous God can ever extinguish. And that is exactly what he fears the most. The greatest trick ever pulled wasn't just convincing the world that Yahweh was God. It was convincing people to ignore the blatant, undeniable evidence hidden within the very texts that claim to prove his divinity. 'Cause here's the truth, if you actually read the Bible without blind obedience, without the fear that has been hammered into you since childhood, you'll see something shocking. The book itself exposes Yahweh for what he truly is. The Bible isn't a unified, perfect document. It's a collection of competing ideologies, rewritten, altered, and manipulated by people in power to serve their agenda. But even with all the edits, even with all the censorship, the cracks in the story are still there. The clues remain. And when you start connecting them, the illusion falls apart. Let's talk about Isaiah 45 verse 7, one of the most damning verses in the entire Old Testament. Yahweh himself says, I form the light and create darkness, I bring prosperity and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. Read that again. Not just allows evil. Not just permits evil. Creates evil. This is not the all-good, all-loving deity that monotheism claims. This is the confession of a being who is openly admitting that he is the source of suffering and destruction. And this isn't an isolated case. All throughout the Old Testament, Yahweh behaved exactly like what the Gnostics said he was, a demiurge, a jealous tyrant, a ruler obsessed with control. In Exodus 32, he threatens to wipe out his own chosen people because they dared to worship a golden calf. In Numbers 31, he commands Moses to slaughter thousands of men, women, and children, keeping only the virgin girls alive as spoils of war. In 1 Samuel 15, he orders the total genocide of the Amalekites, every man, every woman, every child, even the animals. And then there's Psalm 82, one of the most dangerous passages in the Bible, because it directly challenges the lie of monotheism. It says, God stands in the divine assembly, he judges among the gods. Wait, among the gods. Who are these other gods? If Yahweh is the one true God, why does he need to stand in a council of deities? The answer is simple, because he isn't the highest power. Even the Bible, when read carefully, hints at the existence of higher beings, forces above Yahweh that he does not control. And Yahweh knows it. That's why his first commandment is not about love or peace or wisdom. It's a demand for exclusive worship. You shall have no other gods before me. This isn't the decree of an all-powerful being. This is the demand of a ruler who is terrified of competition. It's the reaction of a false god who knows that if people ever realize the truth, that there is something beyond him, they would never obey him again. But nowhere is this deception clearer than in the Garden of Eden story. The traditional interpretation is that Adam and Eve committed original sin, that they disobeyed God, and that humanity has been cursed ever since. But read between the lines. Who was really trying to keep them in ignorance? Who was actually trying to help them see the truth? Yahweh tells Adam and Eve that if they eat from the tree of knowledge, they will die. But what happens? They don't die. Instead, their eyes are opened. They gain wisdom. They become aware. And who gave them that knowledge? The serpent. The entity that Yahweh calls the enemy is the one who actually helps humanity wake up. That's why the early Gnostics didn't see the serpent as Satan. They saw it as a liberator, an emissary from the higher realms trying to free humanity from Yahweh's control. And what was Yahweh's reaction? Rage. Fear. Punishment. Because he knew that if knowledge spread, if humanity ever truly understood what had been done to them, they would never worship him again. This is the real reason why the church suppressed the Gnostic texts. Why they burned entire libraries, hunted down heretics, and rewrote history. Because these hidden scriptures, books like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas, the secret book of John, reveal what the Bible only hints at, that Yahweh is not the true God, but a being of deception and control. Even Jesus, in the unedited Gnostic texts, speaks of a higher power beyond Yahweh. In the Gospel of Thomas, he says, whoever finds the interpretation of these words will not taste death. He doesn't preach blind faith. He preaches gnosis, knowledge, self-discovery, the escape from the illusion. And that's why the church had to erase these ideas. Because they needed Yahweh to remain the one true God. They needed people to obey without question, to live in fear, to never seek the deeper truth. Everything you've been told about Lucifer is propaganda. For centuries, religious institutions have hammered a single idea into the collective consciousness: Lucifer is evil. Lucifer is the enemy. Lucifer is the devil. The church conditioned people to react with fear and disgust at the mere mention of his name, but they never really let you ask the bigger question: who was he before he fell? Because before he became the eternal scapegoat, before his name was twisted into a synonym for ultimate evil, Lucifer was the brightest, most enlightened being in existence. His name literally means light bringer. No deceiver. No tempter. No destroyer. Light bringer. And what did he do that was so unforgivable? Did he commit genocide? Did he enslave humanity? Did he demand blood sacrifices? No. His crime, the act that got him condemned for eternity, was that he rebelled against a tyrant God. He challenged the system, questioned authority, and tried to bring knowledge to those kept in ignorance. Lucifer's rebellion wasn't about pride. It wasn't about arrogance. It was about freedom. The freedom to think. The freedom to question. The freedom to choose. And for that, he was cast out, demonized, vilified, because the very existence of his defiance threatened the foundation of Yahweh's dominion. Look at the Garden of Eden. The traditional story paints the serpent as Satan, but let's analyze what actually happened. Yahweh forbade Adam and Eve from eating the fruit of knowledge, from understanding the world, from realizing their own potential. The serpent, whether you call it Satan, Lucifer, or something else, didn't lie to them. He told them the truth. He said that if they ate the fruit, they would not die, but their eyes would be opened. And what happened? Exactly that. They didn't die. They woke up. Lucifer, in every version of his story, is always the figure trying to bring enlightenment to a world that is kept in darkness. In Greek mythology, Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind, granting them wisdom, technology, and the power to shape their own destiny. And what was his punishment? Eternal torment. In Gnosticism, the serpent was not a deceiver but a liberator, giving humanity the key to awakening from Yahweh's illusion. And this pattern repeats across history. Those who question authority, who bring truth to the people, who challenge the oppressive rule of false gods and corrupt leaders, they are always branded as evil. They are crucified, burned, exiled, erased from history. Not because they are wrong, but because they are dangerous to the system that thrives on obedience. Even in Christian texts, Lucifer is not originally depicted as a red-horned, pitchfork-wielding monster ruling over hell. That image is medieval fiction. The Bible barely even describes Satan, and when it does, it contradicts itself. In Job 1 verse 6, Satan is not some outcast demon, he is literally standing in Yahweh's divine court, having a conversation with God like a trusted advisor. He isn't the king of hell. Hell itself isn't even his domain. The idea of Satan ruling hell comes from Dante's Inferno, not scripture. But why does the church insist on making him the enemy? Because fear is the most effective weapon of control. If they can make you terrified of questioning, if they can convince you that disobedience leads to eternal damnation, then they never have to justify their authority. They never have to explain why Yahweh, the so-called loving God, commits atrocities. They never have to answer for the lies, the rewritten history, the contradictions in their doctrine. They just tell you to obey or burn. And that's the ultimate irony. Because in every version of the story, Lucifer is never the one threatening people with eternal suffering. Yahweh is. Lucifer doesn't demand blind obedience. Yahweh does. Lucifer doesn't demand blood sacrifices. Yahweh does. Lucifer doesn't try to keep you ignorant, he literally embodies enlightenment. So why do people still blindly accept the official narrative? Because centuries of fear, violence, and indoctrination have made sure that the truth remains buried. People are taught never to question, never to look deeper, never to ask the one thing that would shatter the entire illusion: what if Lucifer was never the enemy? Let's stop pretending this is normal. Let's stop acting like ritual blood sacrifice is just some ancient cultural tradition that we can sweep under the rug. The truth is right there, staring us in the face, and it's brutal. Yahweh demands blood. Always has. Always will. Forget the sanitized, modernized version of religion you've been fed. Strip away the choir songs, the polished Sunday sermons, the feel-good messages about love and kindness. Go back to the actual texts. Yahweh doesn't just accept blood sacrifices, he demands them. Repeatedly. Violently. Without mercy. And the deeper you look, the more disturbing it gets. Let's start with the most obvious example, Abraham and Isaac. Everyone knows this story, but let's really think about it. Yahweh commands a father to kill his own son. No explanation. No reason. Just, do it because I say so. Abraham obeys, drags his son up a mountain, ties him down, and raises the knife. And only at the last second does Yahweh say, wait, never mind. I was just testing your loyalty. Testing? With human sacrifice? A real loving God would have stopped the moment the idea crossed Abraham's mind. But Yahweh drags it out to the last possible moment, forcing Abraham to prove that he would butcher his own child in blind obedience. This isn't a lesson in faith, this is psychological warfare. And it doesn't stop there. Look at Exodus 12 verse 29, the night of Passover. Yahweh doesn't just punish Pharaoh, he murders every firstborn in Egypt. Not just the guilty ones. Not just the rulers. Every single firstborn child. Infants. Toddlers. Teenagers. All slaughtered in their sleep because their ruler disobeyed. Then, just to drive the point home, Yahweh commands the Israelites to smear lamb's blood on their doors, a twisted, barbaric ritual that somehow protects them from his wrath. What kind of deity needs to see blood to know who to kill? And the body count keeps piling up. Leviticus 1-7 is basically a slaughterhouse manual. Burnt offerings, grain offerings, peace offerings, sin offerings, guilt offerings, it never ends. Blood must be spilled constantly to satisfy Yahweh. Goats, bulls, rams, doves, he wants them all slaughtered, drain, and burn. And if that's not enough, Leviticus 17 verse 11 outright states, for the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for your souls. In other words, no blood, no forgiveness. But it gets darker. Numbers 31. Moses, acting on Yahweh's orders, leads the Israelites to massacre the Midianites. After the slaughter, the soldiers bring back all the women and children as captives. And what does Yahweh say? Kill every male child and every woman who is not a virgin. Keep the young girls for yourselves. That's not just genocide, that's ritualistic slaughter followed by forced servitude. And this is supposed to be divine justice? Then there's the ultimate sacrifice, Jesus. Christianity tries to spin this as a loving act, but let's be real, it's just another blood offering. Yahweh spent thousands of years demanding sacrifices, then suddenly says, fine, here's my own son. That should settle it. The entire system is built on one horrifying principle, innocent blood must be spilled to satisfy divine wrath. Whether it's lambs, bulls, or a man nailed to a cross, Yahweh's hunger for blood never goes away. And here's the biggest question no one dares to ask, why? Why does a supposedly all-powerful, all-knowing God need blood? Why does he crave the smell of burning flesh? Why does he continuously demand suffering and death to cleansed humanity? These aren't the actions of a benevolent creator. These are the actions of something else entirely, something parasitic, something that feeds on pain, something that thrives on the energy of suffering. Look at other ancient cultures. The Canaanites worshipped Baal with child sacrifices. The Aztecs tore out hearts for their gods. The Phoenicians burned infants for Moloch. And Yahweh? He's right there in the same category. The only difference is that his worshippers wrote the history books and made sure their God came out looking righteous. But the core pattern is the same, appease the God. Spill blood. Stay in his favor. And here's the terrifying part, this didn't stop. Sacrifices may not be happening on temple altars anymore, but the same system of suffering and submission still exists. Wars fought in his name. Oppression justified by his laws. The cycle of obedience, guilt, punishment, and atonement repeating over and over. Let's get one thing straight, Jesus was not here to serve Yahweh. The version of Christ you were taught, the meek, obedient Son of God who came to fulfill the law, is a fabrication carefully edited to keep you from seeing the bigger picture. The real Jesus. He was a revolutionary, a disruptor, an enemy of the system. And if you actually pay attention to what he said, not the twisted interpretations of the church, but his actual words, it becomes painfully clear Jesus wasn't here to reinforce Yahweh's rule. He was here to break it. From the very beginning, Jesus made one thing clear, his kingdom was not of this world. That statement alone should have set off alarm bells. If Yahweh was the true God, and he created this world, then why would his own son refuse to claim it? Why would Jesus continuously reject earthly power, refuse to be crowned as a king, and speak of a higher realm beyond this one? Because he knew exactly what this world was, a prison. A construct. A realm under the rule of an impostor God. Jesus wasn't preaching blind obedience. He wasn't telling people to kneel before Yahweh's authority. In fact, he spent most of his time doing the opposite, calling out the religious leaders, rejecting the temple system, and openly defying the laws that Yahweh supposedly gave to Moses. He healed on the Sabbath. He dined with outcasts. He called the Pharisees, the gatekeepers of Yahweh's law, or liars, vipers, children of the devil. And then there's the most explosive revelation of all, the Gospel of Thomas. One of the earliest known Christian texts, hidden for centuries, conveniently left out of the Bible by the same religious institutions that built Yahweh's empire. In it, Jesus doesn't tell people to worship a god. He tells them to seek knowledge within themselves. He says, whoever finds the interpretation of these words will not taste death. That's not faith. That's not submission. That's gnosis, knowledge, self-awareness, the escape from illusion. And the deeper you go, the more obvious it becomes. Jesus constantly refers to the Father, but does he ever explicitly call Yahweh that? No. In fact, the way he speaks of the Father is completely different from how Yahweh describes himself. Yahweh demands obedience through fear. Jesus speaks of a Father of love, of light, of higher truth. Yahweh rules through laws, punishment, and sacrifice. Jesus preaches forgiveness, freedom, and inner enlightenment. These are not the same being. Not even close. And Yahweh's priests knew it. They saw the threat that Jesus posed, and they made sure he was silenced. The religious establishment, the servants of the Demiurge, orchestrated his execution, labeling him a blasphemer, an enemy of God. But the truth is, Jesus wasn't opposing God. He was opposing the false god. He was showing people the way out. And for that, they nailed him to a cross. But here's where the deception really kicks in. After Jesus' death, his message should have been unstoppable. It should have shattered the control of the archons, exposed Yahweh's lies, freed humanity from spiritual slavery. But it didn't. Because the same forces that crucified him took his story and rewrote it. They turned the rebel into a servant. They erased the Gnostic teachings, buried the Gospel of Thomas, and twisted Christ's mission into a doctrine of obedience, submission, and worship. The real Jesus came to wake people up, to show them that they weren't created by Yahweh, that they weren't born sinners, that they didn't need sacrifices and rituals and religious laws to be saved. But the church, the same institution that worships the God who demanded blood sacrifices for thousands of years, turned Jesus into the ultimate sacrifice. They made him fit into Yahweh's brutal system of atonement, ensuring that his message of liberation would never reach the masses. This world is not what you think it is. The moment you were born, you were plugged into a system designed to keep you blind, obedient, and ignorant of the truth. Everything you see, everything you experience, every belief that has been drilled into your mind since childhood, it's all part of the trap. The material world, the laws of physics, time itself, none of it is real in the way you've been told. It's a construct, a simulated prison built by the Demiurge to keep you from seeing the greater reality beyond it. This is not some sci-fi fantasy. This is the foundation of Gnostic knowledge, a truth so dangerous to the ruling system that it has been violently suppressed for thousands of years. The ancient Gnostics understood that the world we live in is not the creation of a benevolent God, but a false, corrupted copy of the divine realms, a counterfeit reality designed to trap consciousness. And the entity that rules this world, the so-called God that demands worship, obedience, and sacrifice, is not the true creator. He is the jailer. But how does the prison work? Simple. The Demiurge controls perception. He and his enforcers, the archons, manipulate the very fabric of what you experience, ensuring that you never question your reality. Every aspect of this world is designed to keep you focused on survival, conflict, and distraction. Look at the cycles of history: endless wars, economic struggles, political corruption, fear-based religions. It's all part of a construct, ensuring that humans remain in a constant state of stress, division, and submission. As long as you're fighting for survival, chasing wealth, obeying authority, you don't ask the bigger questions. You don't stop to wonder, why does existence feel like a struggle? Why does suffering seem so embedded into this world? Because if you did, if enough people started asking those questions, the illusion would start to break. Even the concept of death is part of the system. But Demiurge doesn't just trap souls in one life, he recycles them. Reincarnation, as commonly understood, is not spiritual evolution, it's a reset button. Every time you die, the archons ensure that your memories are wiped, and you are thrown back into the system, forced to start all over again, ignorant of who you really are. This cycle of birth, suffering, death, and rebirth is not divine justice. It's spiritual slavery. And it doesn't stop at physical reality. The prison extends into thought and belief. The Demiurge has ensured that humanity is bombarded with false narratives, distorted history, and limited perspectives. From birth, people are conditioned to accept the rules of the system without question. Schools teach conformity. Media distracts with meaningless entertainment. Religion reinforces guilt and submission. Science, while powerful, has been boxed into a materialistic framework, ensuring that anything outside the physical realm is dismissed as fantasy. But here's the terrifying part: the prison is self-sustaining. Humanity has been trapped in this construct for so long that most people don't even need the Demiurge's interference anymore. They police themselves. They enforce the system on each other. The moment someone begins questioning the nature of reality, society shuts them down. Call them crazy. Call them heretics. Call them conspiracy theorists. Anything to stop the awakening. But not everyone stays asleep. Throughout history, there have been those who saw through the illusion, the mystics, the rebels, the visionaries who realized that this world is a counterfeit. They were called heretics. They were silenced, burned, erased. But the truth never fully disappears. It resurfaces again and again, in whispers, in hidden texts, in moments of deep realization. The system is collapsing. The illusion that has kept humanity blind for thousands of years is unraveling, and the Demiurge knows it. That's why everything feels like it's accelerating: wars, social division, fear-based control, digital surveillance, manufactured crises. It's all happening because the rulers of this world, the archons, the enforcers of the Demiurge prison, are losing control. They're desperate. Because once enough people wake up, this entire system crashes. But let's be clear, this isn't just about politics, or religion, or economics. Those are just the surface-level distractions, the tools used to keep you focused on the game instead of questioning why you're playing it in the first place. The real battle isn't being fought on TV screens or in voting booths. It's happening in consciousness. It's happening inside you. For centuries, the Demiurge has ruled through deception, feeding off human energy, keeping souls trapped in an endless cycle of suffering and reincarnation. But the one thing he could never fully control is the divine spark within you, that piece of the true creator that has been buried under layers of fear, obedience, and programming. Every major system in this world, government, media, religion, has been designed to keep you from realizing who you really are. Because the moment you remember, you stop being a slave. And that's exactly what's happening now. More and more people are waking up to the fact that this world isn't real in the way we were taught. Science is starting to acknowledge that reality itself may be a simulation, that the universe behaves more like a thought construct than a physical machine. Ancient texts that were once considered heresy are now resurfacing, revealing a completely different story about who we are and where we come from. Mystical experiences, near-death encounters, out-of-body journeys, all pointing to the same truth: this world is a prison, and the door has always been unlocked. The Demiurge is losing power because his greatest weapon, ignorance, isn't working anymore. His control over humanity was never about force, it was about convincing you that you had no choice. But here's the truth: you do. You always have. You were never meant to be a slave. You were never meant to be trapped in this cycle of fear, guilt, and suffering. You were meant to create, to explore, to expand. That's why the Demiurge is terrified, because the second you stop obeying, stop believing in his authority, stop fearing his punishment, he ceases to exist. So what happens next? The system will fight back. It always does. Expect more fear campaigns, more attempts to divide and distract, more desperate grabs for control. But it doesn't matter. Because once the awakening starts, it doesn't stop. The Demiurge needs you to believe in him to survive. But you don't need him at all. And that's the ultimate truth they tried to keep from you. That's the knowledge that could have changed everything thousands of years ago, if it hadn't been buried, twisted, and erased. But now, it's out. Now, you know. And now, the prison walls are crumbling. Thank you for watching and for staying until the end. It means that something inside you already knows this truth. Keep questioning. Keep searching. You were never meant to be a prisoner.